once again, I would just remind you that all you have to do to stay abreast of the continuing deterioration at Fukushima, and remember the story last week about how the gamma radiation is actually literally deteriorating the steel. It's breaking it down in the spent fuel pool and probably what's left of the reactor cores. Reactor number 2 is 100% liquefaction. Spent fuel pool number 3 is a mess. That's the MOX fuel spent fuel pool. 35-ton crane fell on top of that one. They can't even get near it. And the gamma radiation is literally decomposing the steel and breaking the building, the structure down at spent fuel pool 4, probably 3 as well, and who knows what's going on at 2. Nobody can even get near 2. It's that dangerous. Read the headlines, right? Arnie Gunderson, spent fuel pool number 4 could contaminate the entire Western Hemisphere if it falls to the ground or loses its ability to retain water, which it already has partially done. TEPCO, no plans to speed up the removal of spent fuel rods in spent fuel pool number 4. No plans. They're going to leave things on schedule. They may get to it 2015, they say. These people are insane. Arnie Gunderson believes plutonium particles and isotopes are in the Pacific Ocean. Well, obviously, not just plutonium, cesium, many others. Fukushima, the total levels of radiation being emitted are not decreasing at all after a year. All right? Depleted uranium, Fukushima and Karma, another excellent article. Spent fuel pool number 4, work is being handled like some simple construction project. Chris Busby says Fukushima is dumping 100 terabecquerels of radiation a day into the air and the ocean. TEPCO admitted a new meltdown occurred in spent fuel pool number 4 several days ago. And ultimately, again, it's the amount, trillions of becquerels per day being emitted from Fukushima. Michael Collins is up with us first tonight. He, of course, at EnviroReporter.com with Denise, trying to keep a handle on things as he sees it in the greater west side of L.A. area and elsewhere. Hello, Michael. Welcome back.
And thank you. This kind of stuff is not just affecting some place people think is called Fukushima. This is the east of Japan. All that ash we've talked about that has been made by burning all the radioactive debris in Tokyo Bay where they've been dumping it. Now the bay is becoming radioactive. We've had numerous detections all over the country, all over North America, all over Europe of Fukushima radiation, and it's increasing. This stuff that you just talked about, it's almost hard to believe. But guess what? It's not any better on this side of the Pacific. I mean, in your news segment that came before the show, I don't know if you noticed the 7,000 pounds of pot floating ashore in Orange County. Well, you know where it's probably headed? Probably headed for the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, or SONGS, because it's come out, Jeff, since we've last talked, that they had a pot problem with the guys that are supposed to go and make sure that cables don't spontaneously catch on fire at this nuclear power plant that is within 50 miles of 8.5 million people, that they make the rounds and they look at these cables, Jeff, and they were able to get out of having a certain kind of design that just separates these things. I mean, right. A design change demanded decades ago. And now we find out we got guys who are falsifying records for checking around the plant. I mean, how hard is it? You know, when they let you go and smoke a joint, you're walking around, you're supposed to be the one who makes sure those cables don't catch on fire and have a meltdown on this side of the pond.
Don't they check them every 2 hours, don't they?
It's supposed to be every hour.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a lot.
They were only getting around to
it
every 2 hours. Yeah, right.
So, yeah. It also comes when folks hear just the most current information, which is so amazing. Each and every one of those is a big story. I got to remind him, go to Rense.com and look right down in the middle of the page. You're going to see it there. Fact of the matter is, what happens in America vis-a-vis what's going on in Japan, it affects all of us. And today, we had the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission forced out, and there is a message in that. It's not just a message. His name is kind of hard to pronounce, but I did figure it out. It's Jaskow.
Mm-hmm.
But Gregory Jaskow was not an outspoken NRC chairman. He basically got the post because of a Democratic senator from Nevada, Harry Reid, who fought successfully to keep Yucca Mountain as a high-level nuclear repository out of that state. A decision I think that should be reconsidered in light of the. It
really should.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to the world, to the country, to get that crap out of all the 105 reactors and plants. The spent fuel needs to go somewhere. Yucca Mountain was a start, and they've exploded so many nuclear weapons in the Nevada desert now. Anyway.
There's a simple way to do it. Yucca Mountain was supposed to be designed to take the worst of the worst, put it in a repository. It's entombed in salt or the geologic formation, and we could forget about it. The fact is there's earthquake faults, and if you were to just leave it alone, chance it could leak, get into the big water table that's there. I think it's the Amargosa, and it connects to the water under Death Valley.
That's right. No, that's true.
The thing is
but you've got to find a place to put it. You've got to tend to it.
Find a place
there
to
are earthquake faults
everywhere.
You're not going to get away from that.
Oh, with tornadoes, hurricanes, terrorism, we don't need it. So we have to rethink that. And the way to do it there, and I think it's just a common sense thing, just put it in differently. Make it accessible. Make it so those people on the hour, on those catwalks, can go inspect to make sure it's not leaking. So it's accessible. It'd take more space, but at least we'd use it. I mean, it's ready to go. So this guy was put in by Reid, in essence, and he was able to, because Reid, and having the same point of view, or doing his bidding, however you want to look at it, kept Yucca Mountain off the table. But he did something else. You know, we had a study after Fukushima, very lightweight study, about all the things that we could do to try to avoid Fukushima. You know what they are? All the things that should have been done long ago, and not nearly enough of them, Jeff. And 4 commissioners on the NRC said, no way. No. He was the single yes vote. Today, when you see that this guy steps down, the way it's portrayed in the media is, rocky tenure comes to an end. They tried to say things like he harassed women by being very dominant and giving them orders and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just all this hooey. But what it means to the folks listening, and to you and me, Jeff, is that when after Fukushima, which is a genie out of the bottle the size of the Incredible Hulk, is still cranking along. And in this country, what do? We have even a smidgen of reform for trying to make these aging reactors, 104, 105 of them across the country, make them safer, learn from Fukushima. We hammer the guy that would do that. This comes on the heels of what's going on in San Onofre. And let me tell you, this does not portend well for the people of Southern California. If they want to sleep well at night, if they're at all concerned about these things, I'll tell you why. He was the guy who said, you know what, we're not going to let them fire up until they can prove everything's okay. But Southern California Edison's losing $1 million a day, Jeff, and that's gotta hurt.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt them at all. Hurts the consumers. Come on.
That's right.
They don't. Go ahead.
That's nothing. It's nothing. But the thing is, they want to start up, maybe run at 35%, and or between 50 and 80%. Pardon me. Now this is a setup for incredible disaster. I mean, if you're going down down the street and your car just totally overheats and stuff's coming out from under the hood and you know something's wrong, are you going to wait, let it cool down, and do nothing about it, or begin to do something about it, like raise the hood, you're going to take a look, something's wrong, but you don't really find out what's wrong and then jump back in it? Nobody would do that. So then why are these people doing that?
What's the deal now? In sum, we got to take a break. What's the deal? In fact, let's forget the break. We're going to go right through it. Is San Onofre going to be fired up or not?
Well,
what's your best guess? This is crazy. Look, they're playing with San Diego, L.A., Orange County, wiping it out, literally wiping out Southern California's potential to host human beings. That's what's on the line here. Is it worth it? Come on, this is nuts. It's not even a viable question.
All right. You know what? Different ways to look at it. I think most of us would think there's no way a good American would do something so wrong, not knowing the risk, not planning for the worst-case scenario. I beg to differ. And this is the proof. This guy gets hammered today. But in terms of San Onofre, this is what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on the 15th said in a statement. The NRC spokesman, Victor Drick, said the company informed the agency, meaning Southern California Edison, which owns San Onofre, that the company informed the agency of the steam generator designs, quote, this is NRC, in accordance with NRC requirements. And end quote. And that portions of the design were reviewed by federal inspectors during the installation. He added that a team of investigators is reviewing those changes as part of its probe into tubeware at the plant. Mm-hmm. Now, I point this out is because this agency just came out and said they didn't do anything wrong, and we were there. Well, that's like a mechanic flubbing on a F-18 and it crashing, and his supervisor saying, well, it couldn't have been his fault because I was there. They did everything right. Well, then how does that explain what has happened to these tubes? They've had to plug 1,300 of them. And, folks, that you just can't turn this thing off. It's still on. They could scram it, meaning they could take it out of active power generation where the rods get to interact with each other, but by the grace of God. And here you have, this kind of situation. What can people do about it? Well, at least know about it. And this is a good start here.
I agree. All right. So what's going on in terms of testing, background, rain, no rain now to speak of? What are we seeing? Are you going along the ocean shore yet now to try to test? You better take a plastic bag and put it over that inspector, because the moisture potentially carrying radioactive isotopes could go right in there and certainly pollute and contaminate your Geiger-Muller tube. What are you finding out?
We are certainly finding higher radiation in general, and we're seeing it on ambient interior and exterior, which is not very comforting, because the ambient concentration is the one that accounts at this point down here in Southern California. We've been working on a story that's going to come out in a couple of days that is all about radiation and chemicals and affects quite a lot of people. It has had us not out in the field testing in a systematic manner, but we are always testing it. In BioReporter.com, you can see it 24/7. You can get an idea of what the radiation levels in the basin are. But once we get this big piece, Jeff, kicked out the door, we're going to be going right back into testing different things. But we also have a big investigation having to do with results that we've already received, dozens of reports for various material and food and drink products from Canada, from Western Canada, Vancouver. And we're going to be looking at that. And because the people who shared these reports with us spent a lot of money to have it looked at, we have a pretty good idea that some bad news is on the way. And it's not just on the way in terms of the results we're getting. We're really cursed by the problems that we have with being able to even detect stuff. Detect stuff in a way that'll make, say, a reporter get it. Like, the nuclear radiation monitors that you and I like so much, and I know you like GeigerCounters.com, I think it is.
That's it.
The inspector alerts, they are fantastic, and they go right down lower than background. They can really pick stuff up. But the thing is, they won't tell you what the isotopes are. So if you want to know what the isotopes are, you got to send it to a lab. But there at the lab, which probably knows more about radiation than you do, they're going to tell you this is as low as we can go. Or they won't tell you at all. They'll just hand you back the results, and it will say on it, minimum detectable concentration. And if the concentration is hundreds of times higher than it should be, then you can't detect anything between, say, background and hundreds of times background. And so you're cursed at the lab. Every lab in this country has problems. And I'm not going to endear me to labs, but, there are ways to get things tested. People send you tested stuff. But for my money, still, the best thing to have is a handheld inspector. And, there's going to come a time where we're going to get on the horn and we are going to talk some even worse stuff where more people will be like tuned in going, oh my God, it happened, 4 fell over. And the smart people who listen to this show are going to go, I should have got one.
Mm-hmm.
And the price will go up and people will, price gouge and the rest of it. But it gives you a good idea of what you're dealing with. And it's very accurate.
All
so we're
true.
going to be coming back to that. But we've got a real kicker coming on Wednesday. And it's unfortunate in that it will not give you a lot of additional faith in your government if anybody had any anyway.
Uh-huh.
Now, I guess it'd be fair to say that you probably have a few Ron Paul supporters.
Oh, yeah.
In the audience. And as I understand it, he's going to be going to the Republican convention, and he's going to be trying to get some things that he feels are important and that are important to the people who support it. And I would just venture that that's a campaign that listens to its people pretty good, and that if any of you folks have it in mind, you might want to talk to the folks in the Ron Paul campaign and say, why don't you talk about something that's really threatening us, and at least have a position about it. I mean, do we just ignore it like we are? I mean, it's just full hands off, folks. You're just not getting the information. You do get it from foreign press, but I mean, you don't get any of it towards our own leaders. I think you probably saw in the press, Jeff, where we had Japanese reporters asking a high-level Japanese government official, why aren't you talking about the worst-case scenario? Have you planned for the worst-case scenario? What are we going to do if the spent fuel pool at 4 falls over, if number 3 collapses? What are we going to do? And the senior vice minister of the cabinet office, and he's a lower house member, and he's in the ruling Democratic Party of Japan, not associated with the Democrats here.
Right.
He wouldn't comment. He wouldn't answer the question.
No, they stonewall it.
He changed. He said that we should no longer use the term safe without evaluating actual risk. So if it's not right for a government official to talk about is it safe or not unless he can tell you the risk. Yeah. Well, they're lucky I'm not running that country. But I got to tell you, we're countries unto ourselves, but we've got to be linked up, and we're doing it right here. But there's something I forget, Jeff, every week to say to people, which is, if you're going on an airplane, wear an N95 snub-nosed mask made by 3M in America.
Uh-huh.
You know, people are going to start traveling now. And that's just one thing you got to do. When you hear it hit the fan and you start seeing higher detections, if you go to the very hard to navigate RadNet site of the US EPA and you see beta going through the roof, or you start getting reports of it from around here, or Radiation Network, which has got a lot of flaws, in my opinion, but I mean, at least it's there. Then you've got to think about getting your HEPA filters for your home, for your office, for your bedroom. And you've got to think about getting good water purifiers. You've got to be active, or it'll hit you like a tsunami. And you'll say, why didn't I do anything? Now, normally a reporter is not supposed to sit there and cheerlead people into doing something, but I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is, because Jeff and I are friends and we have good rapport, we get so much good information out, we just cut through the bull and get right to it. It is bad news out there, and we're on our own, and you have to activate. And if you think, well, I don't care so much about myself, you know, think about that person in the next room, if there is somebody in the next room. Think about that kid down the street you like, that you want to grow up to be a good, productive American. And then rethink that thought. Or, you know, just watch. But
Very
I
good.
tell you, Jeff, I'm amazed that that with the fits and starts of trying to motivate the world into getting into Fukushima Daiichi to get number 4, it's just it's a slow motion horror movie.
It is, but it's going to accelerate any time now. We had a 6.3 today, I think, off the east coast of Honshu, and it is now projected that a 6.5 would take building 4 down, somewhere right around there. So we're right on the edge, right on the edge.
But that 6.3 weakened it further.
Oh, always, every time. Thank you, Michael, as always.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, talk to you next week.
You bet. Thank you so much. Good night.
Okay, we'll pause on that note and come back with Yoichi Shimatsu in a minute. Okay, and welcome back. Talking to Yoichi Shimatsu this half hour. He is somewhere in the Far East, as they say. Where are you, Yoichi?
Hi, Jeff. I'm back in Thailand, where I can get more reliable phone connections because there are fewer providers. I was traveling in Malaysia and so missed you a couple times there. Sorry about that. It's, when you go from one cellular system to the next, the phone sort of shuts down. And, frequently there.
Okay.
So anyways, that's the story. We've had a lot of events, of course, since then, a lot of deterioration at Fukushima, and also these other global events, the global ramification. And
Right. But let's talk about
combined with natural. I mean, synergizing with natural disasters. I think
exactly.
That's what's really scary.
Yes. We had a 6.3 today, and they say building 4 will possibly come down with a 6.5. It's just ludicrous. TEPCO, of course, says they won't even attempt to take the fuel out of the spent fuel pool until 2015. They're not going to hurry themselves. Who are these people?
Well, I think they have already tried to take some out by helicopter, maybe possibly with some disastrous results. You know, these fuel rods are very brittle because, they only recently they've admitted that they caught on fire, that they melted down, and I think
they also admitted that a lot of them have broken off and they're sitting at the bottom of the pool in a pile.
That's right. So that means there was a meltdown. There's iodine-131 present in the water in the whole area around there, much more than if it contamination from the other reactors. So obviously, I've always suggested there was a meltdown there in the on March 15th, and then this New Year's, the first week of New Year's, that there was a major event there related to this. So obviously, they probably tried to pull them out. It's probably only made things worse by rattling the cages in there, the frames and the racks. And so they're probably at a real loss of what to do, because the leakage out of there is just lethal for any helicopter pilot to try to pull anything out, and it would be very clumsy. So they're really trapped. They're talking about putting another plastic, transparent cover over reactor 4 to just hold down some of the release of radioactive
Ridiculous.
Dust, but on the other hand, that's also admission. All over Tokyo, they're finding, all over Japan, in fact, they're finding this black dust, which I've always argued is at a radiation level that's too low to be from a melted down fuel rod, but just right for a fuel rod, a normal fuel rod, which, let's say, has been affected by the fire and cracked apart, and its particles went up in the heat column, because the heat column is so hot, it would just drive solid particles of uranium and plutonium up.
Yes.
And this stuff is which, when it hits the upper atmosphere, which is really cold, we're talking about huge difference in temperature, it just fragments the dust and then drifts over and falls down. And this is what we're seeing, is that they're like particles of fuel rods all over Japan, probably at least half of Japan. And this is really scary how far this stuff is drifting, how much it's accumulating. As there's rainfall, it tends to accumulate like gravel does anywhere. People are finding things, finding them very hot, and they're very alarmed. So this is the problem. Now, also this week, look, we've seen all this excitement over this Ring of Fire partial solar eclipse, right?
Yeah.
And this solar eclipse is traveling from Tokyo Bay, home of Tokyo Disneyland, is arcing over to California, to Anaheim, home of the original Disneyland. So this is really the Disneyland eclipse, which basically, while everyone is celebrating and oohing and ahhing, we can't forget that these solar-lunar alignments are an alignment that really magnifies gravitational forces, and where? Right over the Ring of Fire, right over the North Pacific, right over the Fukushima-affected area. So if we have a little earthquake today, that's just a minor taste of what's to come, because we had that super moon, right? A couple of weeks ago, the super moon that everyone moon very close to Earth.
Perigee,
and we see quakes in Modena, Italy, today in Bulgaria, right? So when the moon, when these astral bodies are in alignment like this, big things happen. And this is I hate to refer to this Mayan New Year's, because this Mayan end of the world sort of thing, because I don't really believe it. But the ancient peoples, they had a different sense of time than we do. They measured by the seasons, by the years, by the decades. We measured by the seconds and hours, and even less than that in terms of computer time. Their perceptions are much more tuned with the natural world. They didn't see eclipses as wonderful.
Well, also,
things.
Imagine this. For them, the ancient peoples, the sky was an incredibly alive picture show all the time. Every night, something dynamic was going on.
And directly having an effect on events on Earth. For example, the tides, tidal changes, right? They're happening every day. Yeah. They knew all about it. They could observe these things over the years. They were patient compared to us. We just look at things as a sort of a Polaroid flash image. Oh, this wonderful thing, I have to see it. And we have no sense of memory or accumulation of data in our brains. We keep it all in our computers, which don't do much real thinking for us. So that's a huge difference. And then they looked at solar eclipses, and I'll tell you, animals look at it this way too. In Tokyo, during this last solar eclipse on Sunday, yesterday, the lemurs from Madagascar at the Ape Center, at the Monkey Center near Nagoya, in the center of the country, they refused to come down for breakfast. They were so frightened by what they saw. The 40 lemurs stayed up in their nests, in their trees, clinging to their trees. So obviously they looked upon this event as dreadful. So obviously they might, in their genetic memory, know something about eclipses and earthquakes and catastrophes that we humans have long ago forgotten.
Interesting.
We've lost track of those natural instincts for a long time.
Yeah, we have.
The ancients talked about Osiris, Achilles, the Mayan demigod who swallowed the sun. They didn't see this as a great event. They didn't see earthquakes as a great thing. They thought it was a portent of disasters. And I believe, people in Modena, a lot of people died. Historic buildings went down, cheese factories are smashed. Now Bulgaria. I think once they put it together, that eclipses aren't so fun, I think the news media might take this a little more scientifically and also with some ancient wisdom, put the two together, that this ring of fire eclipse is heralding some sort of major earthquake disaster. And what's sitting there? Two things are sitting there in its path. One is Mount Fuji, which is starting to crack apart, steam is ready to blow. When that thing blows, that's at the epicenter of all of Japan's nuclear reactors. All of them are going to go down. The second point, Fukushima there. A larger and larger, a much larger quake just hit it after this eclipse has passed, and more yet to come. So, we're talking about convergence of events. And by the way, in terms of the Mayan prediction, December 21st, the next eclipse will be on November 13th. So the Mayans are, by some wild, stretch of the imagination, correct. It will be the blackening of the entire sky. It's not going to be the moon eclipsing the sun. And that is not far from, right now, as we stand in, here in Asia, that's not very far from a possibility, an actual possibility, and the blackening of the entire sky. If, Mount Fuji blows and all the reactors go up, that is not a stretch of the imagination anymore. That could well be reality by December.
Agreed. Yeah, you mentioned Disneyland earlier. It's time for me to make a trip to Disneyland again before too much longer. Might as well take one more look.
We're living inside a Disneyland, sitting on top of a volcano.
A volcano, so exactly right.
Yeah, it's the ring of fire. Okay, that's what we're living on top of, and everyone is having so much fun joyriding. They don't notice the ground is shaking. When you're on that roller coaster, until they have to stop it, you don't know that there is an earthquake. Anyway,
I agree.
So these are shocking events in our time, and we're seeing disasters springing up everywhere. Let's just go through some of the other odd disasters that have happened. These tornadoes in Japan just never happen. 500 homes smashed in 5 provinces, right near Fukushima, right in Ibaraki, Ken, prefecture, and Tochigi prefecture. Only one person killed, but houses really damaged. We're talking about tall apartment buildings, reinforced concrete, the whole side, the windows, the whole steel curtain going down, homes destroyed. Didn't hardly make the news because the Japanese government doesn't want to talk about it. The media doesn't want to talk about it. Why? Because at that time there was a convergence of weather. All this incineration that you've been talking about was being driven by a southern wet, humid front toward the north, toward the Siberian front. And these tornadoes and these two fronts collided, and the tornadoes, just like they happened in the winter of this year in the United States, you have this huge amount of electrical energy along with atmospheric wind energy. A lot of energy concentrated, and just incredible for Japan to have these 100 or so tornadoes swooping down out of the sky. Another bizarre effect from the Pandora's box of Fukushima. But this time, even more compounded by the government, because their burning campaign adds a lot of heat, a lot of radioactive energy right into that zone of, right into the cloud area where tornadoes do form. So, another huge event. Another event further away, the death of the Pacific. Chile, on the few inhabited coast, they're finding thousands of dead pelicans, more birds washing up dead. So the radiation has definitely drifted into the southern hemisphere. In Australia, we've talked about HARP, this
that's right. You were the first to bring
US
that up.
Military
Right.
program sort of sending electromagnetic signals, bouncing them off the upper atmosphere, using radiation to do that. We're seeing wallabies in Australia losing their hair, alopecia. They're losing their hair, showing exactly the same symptoms from some unknown, inexplicable disease, which is not a disease, but actual radiation-caused illness here. In fact, on this, as polar bears and seals in Alaska. This is global. We're going from one end of the planet north to south now with these symptoms coming up. You run stories on Alaska Airlines crews losing hair. They're flying right along that pathway. So disaster. Teeth falling out. That's another thing that's becoming very common. Bone loss due to strontium buildup. Strontium buildup leads to massive bone calcium loss, and your teeth fall out. So, and strontium is not something people really report on because of the high levels of cesium that they're recording, on their Geiger counters. You just cannot study all these things unless you have a major research university lab. And unfortunately, our research universities have completely failed us. They're not doing the measurements, that they're supposed to be doing to protect the public welfare. It's all being done by private individuals. Some of them pretty talented doctors and, small labs, local labs, are doing the best they can, but they can only pick up so much. Their technology is only so sensitive. So we're seeing this disaster unfolding, spreading all over this planet, and nothing being done. Just we're sitting around waiting for Mount Fuji to blow up.
That's right.
Blow away Disneyland.
Well, that's the point here. Now, TEPCO announced that they would not increase the pace at which they expect to begin to remove the fuel rods from spent fuel pool number 4. At 2015 is their target date.
They don't have the manpower. Who is crazy enough to go in there? The robots don't work. The robots can roll in there, take a few snaps, run a video cable in there, and the video cable burns out from the radiation. Yeah.
Right.
The electronic equipment is done. Robots cannot survive in there.
No. Now,
if robots can't survive in there, imagine humans. They need to find people. So just yesterday, the Japanese government decided, for the first time in its very racially discriminatory history, to issue multiple entry visas to people from Thailand. Now, why would they do that? Okay?
Funniest thing.
Do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring them in, send them back home if they're feeling real ill, patch them up, send them back in, and then send them home for good to die in Thailand. This is what's going on. They don't have the people. We have a global recession. We don't see millions of people lining up at Japanese job fairs to work inside a cleanup crew in nuclear plants. I mean, people are not that crazy. They're not that desperate. So. Anyway, so this is the situation there we face. The other oddity that we have, the Japanese media has really much played up these measurements from the shadow of the Akadara Mountains, which are between Fukushima and Yamagata Prefecture. These are huge mountains, very cold, very icy cold mountains, which actually blocked a lot of radiation. But they were shocked, the farmers were shocked to find in the shadow of that mountain, on the leeward side, on the inland side, radiation levels. But the strange thing is on the Pacific side, the radiation, the cesium ratio of cesium-137, which is weapons grade, from weapons grade uranium, to 134 is like, 10, just overwhelming. Everyone's measuring cesium-137 as, overwhelmingly, where the 134 pales. So there's a lot of weapons grade. Whereas on the other side of the mountain, we see a 1-to-1 ratio like a normal civilian plant between these two types of isotopes.
Right.
And the conclusion can only be is that the major TEPCO nuclear power plant on the Japan seacoast nearby, Niigata Prefecture, is called Kashiwazaki Kariya. That one has been leaking. Maybe it was the accident they had in 2007, but more likely it was shut down right after the tsunami and earthquake. So more likely this was a recent release, a minor meltdown, at least minor meltdown there on the Japan seaside. And notice in the news that all the reactors in Japan have now been, all 54 are now shut down, even the one in Hokkaido. So I think the conclusion is that, the government has finally realized they've all failed the stress test, and that was an easy stress test.
Oh, yeah.
They failed it. That there's not a reactor in Japan, and including the most modern one, can stand up to an earthquake or tsunami.
No, they've hoisted the flag.
Without serious damage, which would lead to this whole chain of events that we're seeing.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Gunderson
so
believes...
basically, we're getting leakage all over.
Well, here's Arnie Gunderson is saying the obvious, what you've been saying for many, many months.
Yeah.
Plutonium particles are in the Pacific. Isotopes, particles And they're being dumped in there all the time around the clock. Remember, TEPCO admitted 1,000 tons a day of radioactive water into the Pacific. That's the admitted amount.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a terrible thing because plutonium, breaks down. I mean, it's a slow killer, 300,000 years half-life. I'm not sure human beings are still going to be around. We've left a deadly legacy to species yet to come who will take our place on the food chain. This is the next punch. I mean, maybe there will be some sort of rodent or something. Intelligent rodent will take over the planet from us because we screwed up so badly. We have failed so badly. We have misjudged so badly. We've been so arrogant that with the next species that comes along, they're going to be, they'll come along faster because they'll mutate faster, but what they're going to end up with is the same trouble we face, extinction. Yeah.
Precisely.
So, this is incredible, and I don't think any other species has ever done that before. It's doomed the future of life on Earth. So this is plutonium, very much a worry, and it is. I think it would be airborne also because of the heat, the rising heat, the heat column effect, and it would probably these particles would be small enough to stay airborne in the jet stream.
Yeah.
And if the air crews are really suffering,
here's the other side of that.
Humans are coming down with plutonium ingestion. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Trillions of becquerels per day are being emitted from Fukushima in the air and in the water. Trillions of becquerels per day.
Yeah.
It hasn't diminished at all.
These water reports, I think nobody really takes them seriously, that all the water is being stored. I think nobody's really taking that serious anymore. That was a wonderful sideshow there for a couple of weeks, but it didn't last any longer. The filters really are not working. So, basically just raw nuclear material of all sorts, of all kinds of half-life, from very short to very long, are just being dumped in the Pacific. And they're coming up in steam now. It's unstoppable. It's not coming up through the reactors. It's coming straight up through holes in the ground, through the Earth itself. So, we're just, I said earlier, eventually the process keeps up. The Earth, will be so eaten away like a sponge that the reactors will start collapsing into the ground, and then, it'll be all over. I don't know what we'll do. It's just the seaborne contamination is very serious. Oh, yeah. Finally, the U.S. government, I think, has put up some alerts about all the flotsam coming over to the North American coast. Still, we have not had a united response from the marine biology community about this crisis of extinction from Alaska down to Australia, from the snow caps of Alaska to the deserts, to the outbacks of Australia. A massive ecological catastrophe. Probably I can't think of a larger one in the Ice Age, maybe 10,000 years ago. I mean, this is the first one in terms of civilized man. This is the largest catastrophe ever, other than the growth of civilization itself, of course.
It is. It is really. It is absolutely the biggest. Largest, sure.
Yeah. So this is what we're really on the cusp of. The again, the weather's warming up. We'll see. I mean, if this eclipse, these alignments, the closest to the moon on 2 occasions in the last month, is triggering quakes, we just have to be on standby for the next couple of weeks to see what happens. After that, I'll try to venture in. But like I told you, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I don't want to be there when this thing blows. I was there when they were doing these nighttime releases, and I still am doing decontamination or detoxification of my body since then. I've found some ways to wipe out some growth on the skin and all that amazing stuff, that cannot be done, but some herbs can do it. Herbs from Southeast Asia have done it. So we just have to wait and see, play it as it lays, and we're in another round for sure. The first year's over. The earthquakes are really problematic, and then, as I said, volcanic action. Volcanism is really the one that's going to clobber us, and if that happens, Fukushima will only be part of a much larger, huge.
Well, as Arnie Gunderson says, the entire northern hemisphere will be, I don't say uninhabitable, but it will be grievously damaged, and it's not going to stop.
Nuclear winter. winter.
You
So,
got 300. You'll have
winter.
300 tons on the ground.
Yeah.
If that one fuel pool falls, emitting fissile material, isotopes of all kinds, into the air, into the water, unstoppable, nothing, the world's biggest dirty bomb ever.
Yeah. And then be sure it's bomb. We're talking about weapons-grade uranium in there because it was obviously secretly, the shroud was secretly refitted for enrichment purposes.
Correct.
So a lot of the rods in there and that are stored there are actually former, nuclear military warheads. So we're talking about a bomb is not. This is not a metaphor. This is a reality. This is weapons grade material. The cesium-137 is more than proof of that. The presence of that massively in the ocean, in the fish. So yeah, this is very, very serious. I still go back to borax. Ronald Reagan. Borax. We got to start encrusting this thing in salt somehow, and keep the groundwater off the site, and then just build a massive salt dome over this thing. An artificial salt dome is probably the only thing we can do. It's never been tried before, but
if you build something over it, Yoichi, you are then prevented from getting in there and doing.
Into one gigantic crystal there.
Well, you can't. But the problem is it's still leaking water through the basements into the ocean.
That's the problem. The water
and you can't get in there to work. You can't get in there to work on it. So
that's right. That's the problem. Unless you can stop the water somehow, the salt don't. But salt will form. It will begin to solidify. Even with water, you wouldn't need millions of tons of it. So
right.
All
right. Okay, my friend. Thanks for the update.
Very good. We'll keep an eye on the events ahead. This is going to be a very spooky couple of weeks ahead of us with the possibility of massive quake. All right.
Be well. Okay. Yoichi Shimatsu. And he has been just right there from the beginning. One of the world's truly extraordinarily talented and wise environmental reporters, researchers, and analysts. He's amazing. We will be back tomorrow night. Thanks for being here. Take care.